part of the culture and world we live in today, we have an excessive amount of access to things that give us neurochemical pleasure, and like a lot of it. So these things are like alcohol and marijuana, and nicotine and caffeine and drugs and hypersexualized culture and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And my experience has been when I pull away using these things, I call them neurochemical cheats, because I think it's like you're using a substance or an activity just to get that neurochemical release, just to get the pleasure. But the alternative is getting neurochemical release from actually accomplishing things in the narrative that you're living. So like it gives me a neurochemical pleasure to on a small level complete a bunch of chores that I set for myself that I have to do today, like cleaning my room. If I've cleaned the room, I get a little neurochemical release from that.
Nice.
If I have on a larger scale, if I have a long project like that 5-hour movie, it takes me a year and a half to make, I get a huge neurochemical pleasure when I shoot that last scene, or I click render on the final edit and I'm just watching it and I'm like, this is great. A year and a half work, it's done. You get a very strong, solid neurochemical release.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also just, making progress along the way on small goals within larger goals.
Yeah.
And I think that when you start using neurochemical cheats too much, your motivation in doing the natural diegetic narrative neurochemical achievements, it starts to die down or wane or just gets affected. And so there's that to gain. You just become a little more focused and a little more goal oriented and less distracted. But the other thing is even simple pleasures, like we're supposed to get neurochemical release from just being out in nature and breathing air and looking at a beautiful tree or a nice flower. Having a good conversation with someone, having a nice interaction, doing something good for someone else, just little things like these are natural neurochemical pleasures, and they all make sense diegetically in a narrative. And I think when you get rid of the cheats, those things start to be so much more sweet. Kind of like, someone with a standard American diet who's eating a bunch of Twinkies and ice cream and candy and shit.
Yeah.
The fruit isn't that enjoyable to them.
Right.
But when you get rid of all that shit and you eat like just meat and fruit is so delicious and it's so sweet. It's like, it's very exciting. And every piece of fruit has such a unique flavor profile.
Absolutely.
And not just each different fruit, but each, depending on the ripeness and what kind of, where it came from. Like you get, really into the nuanced differences of things. So like, even the neurochemical pleasures of being out in nature and looking at one flower, you get a different neurochemical pleasure from looking at another flower. And I think that too much neurochemical cheating, or even, even something as simple as caffeine, I find to be a major disruptor in being able to enjoy something like a fucking flower, or a piece of fruit, or a good social interaction.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, that seems all correct. Once again, we agree.
Hell yeah.
That. I would like, I haven't explored this with a partner proper, but just because I just got turned on to this idea that semen retention is a good idea at the age of 42.
Right.
Somehow I escaped my whole life without anybody mentioning it to me.
Dude, it's really a fucking... It's not a popular thing, and it makes sense why it's not.
Right, it's challenging.
I mean, because it is it's our biggest neurochemical reward, and it's naturally attached to us. I mean, we're like evolutionarily designed to chase it to some degree, and any sort of idea to voluntarily repress it, not out of fear of God. Because that's, one maybe. I don't know if I want to say it's a toxic way to think about it. Because a lot of people say there's this whole sexual repressive element of organized religion that has really fucked people up. But, and I don't doubt that it has fucked people up. to some degree, but also I do think that sometimes, like for example, like blindly believing a thing and acting on that blind belief and fear can sometimes be better than not believing the thing that isn't necessarily true. Like, let's say the only reason to not murder people is because God will send you to hell when you die. Let's just say that someone believes that's the only reason you shouldn't murder. And because they believe that, they never murder anyone. Mm-hmm. Where if you took that belief from them, oh, God actually doesn't give a shit if you murder. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, now I'm going to go murder because I don't have another reason.
Yeah.
And this is obviously an oversimplification and an extreme example, but it is better that that person believes a thing that maybe isn't necessarily true, or they're blindly believing. Yeah. It has a better outcome. Less people are getting murdered.
Yeah. Right.
So even if you aren't masturbating out of a fear that you're going to go to hell, that might be better for you.
Yeah.
That might be better for you than to believe, oh, I can get away with masturbating all I want.
Well, similarly, if you're looking at it like, maybe not hell, but it's an equivalent of like it's going to take some of your life force away.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and I believe it on this nuanced way of like we're talking about, God and Moses, or Jesus and Moses discovering the real God and the real heaven, and real heaven is a psychological state, as the real hell is a psychological state. It's like, yeah, if you masturbate all the time, you are going to end up in psychological hell because you end up in this really low vibratory place of, scrounging around for the simple neurochemical pleasure. And you're like a slave to your own sexual desire. You're a slave to that spirit of lust. You're constantly chasing sexual pleasure that does not serve you in the highest. You're dispensing with greater goals and your greater power, your life force,
right,
for so much less than you could be.